Okay, let's start with this British embassy.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it creating some chaos or something in Britain. So tell me about why is this such a big deal? Now you finally approved embassy for China to build an embassy. Why is this such a big deal?
Well, the reason it is such a big deal is because in Britain, we have been worked up and indoctrinated for years to believe that the Chinese are our enemies. So, I mean, this has become a kind of endless meme in our media. And now China is building a bigger embassy, not remotely on the scale that the United States is building its embassy. So nonetheless, so for all that reason, because of that reason, all the usual people, the China haters, if I can call them like that, the people who are paranoid about China are going out saying this is all a terrible thing. It's absolutely frightful that the Chinese should be building an embassy. This is a sign that they're going to take over. It proves that our security is useless, that they're going to control us before very long. By the way, I should say I've been here before. I'm probably the only person left anywhere in the world who remembers this. But in the 1970s, during the time of the Soviet Union, they had exactly the same thing happen. The Soviets wanted to build a new embassy in London. They bought a piece of land. They wanted to build an embassy there. There was the identical outcry that we are seeing today. In that instance, the outcry was successful. The embassy was stopped and it was never built. And one of the arguments I remember was that the Russian embassy that would have been built would have been far too big for the location. And as a result of all of this thing with the Chinese embassy, out of curiosity, I went back to the location where the Russians wanted to build their embassy.
Mhm.
And the Americans, that is, an American company, has built a hotel there, which is about 100 times bigger than the Russian embassy, the Soviet embassy would have been. So this is it. I mean, it's just paranoia, hysteria, anti-Chinese sentiment. It just circulates and goes around. And well, for the moment at least, it looks as if the British government, which is trying to preside over a terrible economic situation and understands that relations with China have to be improved, seems to be prepared to push forward with it. And we'll see whether they stick to that position.
I still need to point it out. When China bought this Royal Mint
Yeah,
court, right?
yeah,
8 years ago now. Boris
yeah,
Johnson at the time was the foreign minister, right? He
yeah,
actually wrote a letter to Wang Yi, approved that.
yes.
I mean, when you do and you what is puzzling to me is that the Great Britain, on the one hand, is still living the old dreams of
Yeah,
being the empire. They don't
yeah.
behave like one. If you believe you're a great power, you're a great empire, you don't do these kind of things. You don't give
Well,
a
of course.
letter saying you can build embassy here, and now I'm saying you can't. You can't do things like that,
You're
right?
absolutely you're absolutely correct. But I mean that's what we are in the West. I mean I've told you this before that this is what I've heard from Russians that negotiating with the Chinese is a massively arduous, painstaking thing. I mean, you know, the Chinese are in very, very, very tough negotiators, but once you have a deal, it is a deal.
Yes.
That's it. There's never, whereas the Americans, and I'm afraid all across the West, once we agree the deal, or in this case, we make the offer, we take the deal not as the end of negotiations, but as the start of them. And I mean, you cannot function in that way. But that is what, unfortunately, we increasingly do. So, yes, China was told, build your embassy, do it here. This is the letter. Our foreign secretary sends you the letter with undoubtedly the backing of the prime minister and the cabinet. China acts on that. And what does China discover? The word of the foreign secretary, the prime minister, and the government is worth nothing
Yeah.
because the whole thing can be rewritten and discussed and argued about all over again. As it's hopeless trying to do business. And well, what more can I say?
Yeah. And all I can say is that if you think you're Great Britain, you are a great nation, you should not behave like this.
Well, you're
Because
absolutely right. I mean, we're not behaving like a great nation. We're behaving like a spoiled child.
yeah,
I mean, it's what spoiled children do.
yeah. Kier Starmer is going to visit. I think next week he's going to visit Beijing and supposedly bringing with him a big delegation, business delegation or something. So, and there's even talking about he want to bring back this golden era or something. Is that how you see it? Or
Well, the British government is in a very difficult economic position. I mean, I come. It's difficult again to convey to people in China how bad the situation here now is. Way back in the day when David Cameron and George Osborne were running things in Britain, they said Britain is. I mean, it needs massive investment and new technology to try to get the economy moving again. The British economy has basically got stuck ever since the 2008 financial crisis. We've never really recovered from it. Who are we going to go to? The people who have money, who have investments, who can help us. And yes, we do have things that we can offer them. We have our universities, we have our science, we have the entry that we can provide to the European markets. We can do those things. As we know, everything that went completely off the rails because of hostility to China and the hysteria that came from the United States that people picked up here in Britain and repeated and endlessly repeated. So a new prime minister comes in. The economic situation today is much worse than it was in David Cameron's time. He's tried everything. He's now coming back to the same solution that David Cameron did. So he's going to come to China with a big delegation, and he's going to try to get the Chinese to come back into Britain in the same way that David Cameron did. But whether the Chinese will agree is, of course, an entirely different matter. Britain has less to offer now than it did 15 years ago. And beyond that, China has seen that the British will say, come deal with us, but then they won't. They'll turn back on all of that. So in China, will they trust us?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, look at how they handle the embassy, right?
Well,
So,
indeed, yes.
it's interesting. I saw an interview with Speaker Johnson. He gave an interview to Sky News. He talked about that. He made it very clear. He doesn't like the location that the Chinese embassy is. He said it's a very prominent location. I wish the U.S. embassy is there. He clearly said that. So
yeah. So I mean, the United States is trying to decide where embassies can be located in London.
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Beijing is now you're saying that will China agree to it because Beijing is very busy. Ever since the new year, there has been the Ireland Prime Minister was there, Korean President was there, Pakistani Prime Minister was there, Deputy Prime Minister, and of course Carney, the Canadian. And then coming up, the Finnish Prime Minister will visit Beijing, and of course Kier Starmer, German Chancellor Merz, and of course in April Trump will come. So Beijing is busy. Beijing has a lot of things to do. I'm not even sure it will prioritize this relationship with Britain.
Well, why would it? No, I think you're absolutely correct. Why would it? I mean, despite all the problems in Germany, Germany still has more to offer than Britain. And the relationship with Germany continued successfully for very, very much longer, as compared with the very ephemeral revival of things in Britain. So, why would China expend time and energy to help Britain out of its troubles? And of course, if Kier Starmer goes to Beijing and talks about Ukraine and Kiev and the Russians all over again, which is quite possible, quite likely actually, then the Chinese are going to be even less interested, I would have thought. It's not as if China has any particular reason to like Britain, as we know. So, absolutely, you are You are absolutely right about this. By the way, all of these visitors coming to China at this time, well, I mean, the extent to which China is now the center of world diplomacy, that tells you much more about the realities of the modern world, I would have said, than anything else. And if the Americans are going collectively insane, as they have been doing over the last couple of weeks, well, partly the reason is that all of their most loyal allies, Canada, Britain, Germany, Finland, what are their leaders doing? They're beating the path to Beijing.
I just hope that he doesn't make the mistake again, because the last time they talked about this golden era was 2015. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And look at China now compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And where's Britain compared to 10 years ago, right? So don't make that kind of stupid mistake. You should develop together with China. I really think that's what Britain should do. Just develop together with China. China will be very happy to do that. I think the UK would be a much better place today had it continued its policy to work closely with China, the golden era. Don't you think?
Well, there's absolutely no question about this. I mean, Britain being horrid to China is not going to stop China's progress.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd to think that it can. Sending the British fleet to the Asia Pacific region. I mean, with the Chinese Navy that's now twice as big as the American, the Chinese are not going to be quaking in their shoes because of this. They're not going to change their policies because of this. This is, I mean, you talked about Britain wanting to be a great power. First of all, we're not a great power. And the quicker we understand and accept that, the better for us it will be. But I mean, this isn't great power behavior. It exposes the fact to the world that we're not a great power. So, I mean, it's nonsense. It's absurd. It's entirely performative. And you're absolutely right. Look at where China is as compared with where it was 10 years ago. Look where Britain is as compared to where it was 10 years ago. I mean, the situation gets worse and worse here all the time. I mean, the situation in London is terrible. In Britain is terrible. So we are going down, and we're going down fast. So absolutely, you're right. I mean, we have not achieved anything by being horrible to China. China's growth continues. It's dominating more and more sectors. It's advancing in technology. It's leaving the United States itself far behind. And we are going down. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the West still don't quite read China correctly. Like, I was just reading an article about, in Chinese, that about the 4 years Biden was in the office. So one of the things he did with this CHIPS Act, and he thought he could tighten the grip, the control of the chips, so that will somehow control China, stop China from. Well, one thing it did, what the Chinese government was surprisingly discovered is there are quite a few companies within China. They don't want to support the domestic chip manufacturer. They just always want to buy the foreign, the US ones. But now they don't have a choice. Okay, during that time, they simply didn't have a choice. They have to give a second look at the Chinese chips. Well, when they look at that, okay, it's probably not as perfect as but they're fine. You can use them, and you can get around with lots of things. You can do things with them. So now, after the policy, Trump's Biden's 4 years, now the domestic chips industry get a boost because of that.
Correct.
Which the Chinese government would never be able to do if they only force the people, okay, you have to support the domestic production. You have to, by saying that it doesn't work, but the US policy make it happen, overnight it happened. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And China is the country that is best positioned to pretty much everywhere to adapt. The Americans overestimate always their technological advantages.
Yeah.
They imagine that, they're streets ahead of everybody else in technology. They are not. In fact, they haven't been for a long, long time now. And they still can't get their minds around the fact that China now has an enormous science and technology base, much bigger in scale than the Americans. There are some niche areas where the Americans are still ahead. I mean, with the very highly advanced lithography, for example. But these are niche areas.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about industry, if you know anything about science and technology, scale, size counts.
Yeah.
It really does. If you are building millions of chips, if you have a huge industry that's producing these things on an enormous volumes, if you're already producing chips at very, very high, at the very high end of chips, then it becomes much easier to find the resources, the engineers, the technology, and all of the rest to make the jump into the even more advanced chips, where the Americans foolishly believe that they have the advantage. I said already, I think that before 2030, China will be building chips on an industrial scale using its own lithography machines at 3 nanometers and below. I mean, I've no doubt of it. The Russians, by the way, they did a massive. They got their own program about setting up their own chip industries, which I follow very closely because I do. And in fact, Putin had a meeting about this yesterday and he signed off on it. They expect to be self-sufficient in chips up to 28 nanometers by 2030. And beyond that, they expect to be beyond this. What Russia could do, China is in a far stronger position to do. So, I mean, the Americans, as I said, always make this mistake. By the way, since we're talking about the Russians, exactly the same thing happened with aerospace products. Russian Russian airlines refused always to buy Russian-produced aircraft. They always insisted, we must buy Boeings, we must buy Airbuses. That stopped, so now they're having to produce their own. And suddenly they've discovered, well, we can make aircraft, we can make aircraft engines, we have the engineers and the designers and the factory space. And China's going to be exactly the same, only on a scale 10 times greater, and perhaps much more than 10 times greater. The Americans just don't get this at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you have power, you don't abuse it. You shouldn't abuse it. That's true everywhere, even in business. You have a dominant power. Don't abuse it. Yeah.
That is such a Chinese thing. Of course, the Americans think exactly the opposite. If you don't use your power, then of course you're being soft.
Weak.
Weak, soft-headed. You must use your power.
Yeah. Okay, Carney's speech at the Davos is very interesting. Got lots of attention, right? So, overall, what is your impression? You take away from his speech?
Well, I don't think he intended it to be quite as attract quite as much attention as it did, and it seems the Americans were very upset about it. And he's been Trump tells him he's not welcome on Trump's peace board anymore. So, I mean, the Americans were unhappy. I suspect some people in Europe weren't happy about it either, because what Carney did, and remember, he's not by background a politician. I mean, he's been a central banker. What Carney did was, I think he was trying to justify in front of Trump why he went to China and is trying to revive the relationship with China. But in the process, he said too much. He said, well, this rules-based international order that we've been talking about for all these years. Well, actually, it's nonsense. It's all rubbish. None of us believes it. The other side doesn't believe it. We don't believe it ourselves either. It never had any reality to it. It was all unequal. It was all about us going round and seizing what we could. And, before in the past, we actually did quite well because of it. I mean, Canada did quite well out of it, but now it doesn't really work for us anymore. So we got to think of something else. So by doing that, of course, what he did, I think, as I said, unintentionally, was that he exposed the utter falsity and hypocrisy of what the West has been saying for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it is remarkable that he basically admitted, right, the system, the rules-based international order works for them, for the West.
Yes.
Even and he basically admitted that it's a very hypocritical, it's a double standard. It's kind of conveniently being very pro-West applied, right? Yes. So he basically admit that, which I think that's remarkable because we don't hear that from any major US, Western powers. But I guess his argument is, well, it doesn't work anymore, right? We have to realize now that I think this Greenland thing does kind of like shock everyone, because you're not supposed to take land from us. You're supposed to take from African countries, Asian countries. You should do that to whatever the country. We will support you. Even like genocide in Gaza, we will be okay with all that. You're not supposed to turn against us. I think that's what he's shocked, right?
You've got it absolutely correctly. I mean, what he's basically saying is, we all know it was all nonsense. It never applied to anybody. We always knew what the Americans were all about. We always knew. I mean, he even used the word American hegemony. I mean, China talks about American hegemony and hegemonism. The Americans generally avoid using those words. So Carney talks about, but he says we're fine with that because we were beneficiaries of all of this. Now this great American hegemony is being turned against us. Yes. So it no longer works for us anymore. So we've now got to do something else, and we've got to find other arrangements. So again, I think without perhaps fully understanding what he was saying, he was making the whole West look, well, of course I say he was making, he was showing how cynical and predatory the West ultimately always was. Yeah. By the way, this has always been true about the West. I mean, if you go back to the 19th century and you read what the British were doing in China in the 19th century, you do it from the British, you read British newspapers. It was, all about philanthropy, human rights, spread of Christianity, especially. They used to talk a lot about that, and free trade. It was all done for the good and the benefit of the Chinese, who couldn't understand all of the good things that we meant for them. And, well, of course, Chinese people know better. They know it was never like this. But this is what the West always does. I mean, the West always likes to package its predatory activities. It's imperialism. Let's call it by that name. It's imperialism in lovely packaging. And as the British did it, the Americans did it, the Europeans did it. And here suddenly you have someone, the Prime Minister of Canada, coming along and saying, well, it's all false. We all knew it was all untrue. It's always been untrue. But as I said, it doesn't work for us anymore because now the Americans are coming for us. So we're going to stop talking about it and we're going to start looking for you, friends.
Yeah. The other thing in his speech, he talked about the middle powers, right? Canada is a middle power. And I think he also refers to the Europeans, that we are the middle powers. Yeah. He's calling for the middle powers to basically unite it, so that, because he understand, he admitted that the great powers, they have the means and they could, go alone. They didn't need to. They basically admitted they don't need us. But we, we can be powerful as well if we kind of unite together. Is that what he's calling for as well, right?
Well, he is in a kind of a way.
Okay.
I mean, he's trying to make it look a little bit, like Canada and the others somehow can provide some kind of a balance. I don't think he believes that, actually, because that's simply not going to happen. I mean, the idea that Canada and the other middle-ranking powers. And of course, by other middle-ranking powers, he means the Europeans and Canada. I mean, it's still very much focused on the West, that they can sort of play an active role as a group between the Americans, the Chinese, and the Russians. I don't think anybody seriously supposes that that is so. But it sounds attractive, or was intended to sound attractive. And again, it sort of excuses, it's intended to excuse what some people in the West see as this betrayal that he carried out when he went to China and did all those deals there and said all those things. He said, we must work together because we're no longer the West. We're no longer the collective West anymore. We're fracturing. The Americans are just another great predatory power. We must protect ourselves from them. And we must we would also combine together, even as in fact what we're really doing is playing off one great power against another, which is what it's really all about. Remember what I've always said, in the West, we always think of power dynamics. It's always about that, invariably. It is never about anything else.
Yeah, and even when he's talking about that, if you're not at the table, you will be on the menu. And that clearly is now the Europeans and the Canadians probably feel like they are now on the menu.
Yeah.
But he's not, his suggestion is let's go back to be on the table. If we unite together, we won't be on the menu. I think fundamentally that is a flawed assumption, that there always is a menu and then people at the table. If you want Canada never be on the menu, get rid of the menu, right? Everybody should be at the table. I don't think he meant that.
You're completely correct. That's exactly, you've got it exactly. I mean, it is a fundamentally wrong approach to international relations. I mean, it made sense in the conflicts between the European powers, which continued right up until the Second World War and which led to the World Wars. But it is increasingly making less and less sense in the modern world. In fact, what it is doing, thinking in that way, is causing conflict and instability in the modern world, which is the last thing that we should want. The best thing is to focus on the welfare of our people, and all of us, each of us, work together to achieve it. It's not complicated, but it is not something that Europeans can ever understand because they're hardwired to think in a completely different way.
Yeah. The Chinese social media is so good. Some of them also pointed out that Mark Carney, he was the central bank chair for both Canada and Britain, right? The Bank of Britain. And so he's the quintessential establishment.
Yeah.
Part of the reason he's so troubled by Trump is possibly Trump's investigation of Jerome Powell, right? Because in his view, this is really hurting the central bank, because the Federal Reserve, even though maybe that's not Trump's really purpose, but by doing this, investigating Jerome Powell, I think not only him, I do believe the central banks around the world are a little bit concerned about this. What is going on here with the Federal Reserve? You're just doing something like that. And certainly Mark Carney is coming from that circle. He certainly is not happy with this as well, even though he never said that. I think there's some to it too. Don't you think?
I've no doubt that there is a lot to it. I mean, central banks and central bankers form a distinct class. Again, this is something difficult maybe for people in China to understand, where I think it's called the People's Bank of China. Absolutely doesn't function in that way. I mean, it's never been part of the club in the way that all of these people are, but they all know each other. They all meet with each other. Mark Carney knows Jerome Powell well. I mean, they're almost certainly friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, he does see this as an attack on this club.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly that has alarmed and frightened him a lot. And of course, beyond the attack on Trump as an individual, there is this looming fear that all the Western central bankers have, that they're going to lose control, that governments are going to take back the powers that they gave to the central banks in the United States in the 50s, in other countries around in Europe, in the West, at various times, decisively in Europe with the creation of the European Central Bank, and of course also with the grant by the Blair government of independence to the Bank of England. So they're terrified of this. They don't want to be subordinated again to the bureaucracies, to become part of the bureaucracies and subordinated to the political system. And of course, he's pushing back.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Trump is that sometimes he does things actually, I think, have certain validity to it. Like the Federal Reserve, I do know that in the United States, there are a lot of people actually don't like the fact that the Federal Reserve is a bunch of private banks, right? Yeah. Essentially, private banks can print money. So lots of people are very much bothered by that. I think it's a valid concern. And I do think some reform is needed, but not the way Trump is doing that. He just attacks individuals that he doesn't like, right?
Yes, because he deals in a very personalized form of politics. He's not somebody whose mind ever can look at things in a structural way, and that's his problem. I mean, that because unless you do that, then you can't really address the fundamental issue. You just think that if I get my own person in charge of the Federal Reserve and who will then do what I, as the emperor, want, then that's somehow going to work out better. And of course it won't. I mean, it might work out a little better for him. But in Trump's case, what it will really mean, all it would really mean is that the Federal Reserve will then become a printing press to pay for the various projects and whims and ideas that Donald Trump has.
China's delegation chair, He Lifeng, the vice premier, he also gave a speech. Didn't get as much attention as Carney's, but nonetheless, China's message is very clear. China is open for business, right? Almost the opposite of what Trump is doing right now. So that's. But let me just say this: both Carney's and the He Lifeng's speech, if you read the comments, it's overwhelming that the public, I think, is very much on the side of let's have an alternative, other than the United States. I think that message is very clear from the public.
No question. And this goes beyond Trump. I mean, people can increasingly see that the system that we have in the West is simply not working. I mean, whatever it achieved, and, in the period, the 30 years after the Second World War, we did see very rapid economic growth in the West and a very huge, big increase in living standards. And our political systems in those days were working in a way that was very responsive. But nobody would say that about our systems today. We're becoming less and less equal. Wealth is becoming more and more concentrated. Living standards are stagnating. We have deindustrialization in more and more countries. Germany, of course, is talked about, but Britain has also gone through processes of deindustrialization. And factories are closing in Britain all the time, by the way. Doesn't get the same attention as it should, but it does. The United States also has gone through similar processes. People are tired, and they say that there has to be a better way. The trouble is, in the West, we can't find our way there. But Trump came to power partly because he articulated this feeling. But then as a result of what he's doing and the incredibly violent and blundering way in which he's acting, he has actually intensified this aspiration for change. But also, and also, it's something very remarkable. He's given it an anti-American edge, which is getting stronger all the time. And people increasingly are saying it's not just Trump, it's America altogether that is this incredibly dangerous and unstable country. There was a article in the Financial Times by a commentator whom I don't like at all, by the way, Janash Ganan. He is extremely mainstream. I mean, as mainstream as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about the United States as this rogue, declining superpower thrashing out in all directions. That's the kind of thing we might have said on this show. But he would certainly not have been talking about this, 2 years ago when Joe Biden was in the White House.
Yeah. Macron is very much a joke now. I don't know what's going on with him. Wearing sunglasses. It sounds like he has some condition for his eyes, but it just makes it worse, right? So what exactly is his message? I'm not clear. He's all over the place. What's your take on that?
Well, he is all over the place. You see, at some level, and I've said this many times about Macron, he's a clever man. If you read his speeches, if you see how he speaks, very often he articulates thoughts and ideas which are at a completely different intellectual level from all of the other leaders in the West. One of the reasons they don't fundamentally like him, by the way. But his incredible vanity always gets in the way. And at the same time, even as he's very clever, he's also very inconstant and unfaithful. He changes his position all the time.
Yeah.
And he's lazy. I mean, he's basically very lazy. I mean, he doesn't sit down and do what I have absolutely no doubt Xi Jinping does, which is work hard with his officials to develop a proper program and to, if it's on anything, on creating lithography machines, whatever. I mean, something like, I've no doubt at all about this, that Xi Jinping takes that sort of thing very, very seriously. And not just him, of course, but everybody, all the officials, and many of them, of course, are trained engineers, will be doing that. Macron doesn't. He just thinks that words are enough to achieve change by themselves. Ideas, the great ideas that he has. And of course, the other thing on top of this is he's incredibly aggressive. He will say one thing which looks like it's conciliatory, and then the next day he will swing and he will say something absolutely terrible about you. He's done that about Russia. He's done that about China. He's done that about all sorts of people. So that in the end, nobody trusts him and nobody takes him seriously.
So, but the Europeans now, they did seem react a little bit about this Greenland thing, right? Denmark, pushed back a little bit, saying they're going to sell the debt. And there's, I think, a Swedish fund already sold some. Actually, it did cause 2 days panic in the market, which so Trump said, okay, he's not going to put the tariffs. So Trump a little bit pulled back a little bit. What is, it seems to me, Europe still have tools that they can resist Trump, right? If they do unite together, they still have cards they can play, but they are not confident enough to play those cards, it seems like.
Well, you remember that, I thought, totally brilliant editorial in Global Times that I sent back to you, which I thought captures this absolutely superbly. I mean, first of all, contrasting European attitudes towards the United States, how they constantly bend over backwards to appease the United States, however abusive and aggressive it is, and how at the same time they adopt American paranoia about China, even as China is trying to work constructively with them. And I thought not only was it entirely correct, I was very, very impressed at how intelligently it was all expressed. Well, what you're saying is exactly this, and it is absolutely true. The Europeans, Europe is there's a lot of people in Europe. We're still 450 million people in Europe. We're more than the United States. We're still a big market. We still, at many levels, are big economies. We are also America's key allies.
Yeah.
I mean, if America loses it, this is something, by the way, that some people in Washington don't quite get. But if America loses us, it's lost its big alliance system. And as a superpower, it's very reduced, because one of the reasons why the United States is seen as so powerful is because it has these powerful allies who are with it. So we have lots of things intelligent leaders in the West could do, but we are not going to do them.
Yeah.
Firstly, we are massively divided amongst ourselves. There are pro-American leaders in Europe who would never agree to an anti-American policy. The Germans in particular would never do that. I mean, they're still very nervous of this. We have this obsession with Russia, which has developed a manic quality to which everything must be sacrificed. And we need the Americans involved in order to take on the Russians, because the Russians are still a great power. They may not be as powerful as the Americans. They may not be as powerful as China, but they're much, much more powerful than the European countries individually or in military terms, even taken together are. So we want the Americans to be involved. Of course, negotiations with the Russians, that's not something anybody has ever really thought about. That's not something we're prepared to do. Sometimes it's suggested that we appoint a chief negotiator to negotiate with the Russians, but we can't even agree on who that is. And some of the people who are proposed are so extremely anti-Russian that you can't imagine that they would take it forward. So because of all of these reasons, and because as a result of our own policies, we have increased our dependence, not just on the Americans, not just in military security terms, but in all sorts of other terms too. We depend entirely on the Americans for cloud computing, for example. I mean, if the Americans pull the switch, what would happen? I mean, I don't know what would happen, but I mean, I'm sure it would be big. If the Americans stopped LNG exports to Europe, bear in mind that we can't import Russian gas anymore because we've got 19 sanctions packages which prohibits it. So, you know, in reality, even despite those things, there is a lot we could do, but we're scared to do it. We're frightened to do it. We don't want to do it. And if we did these things, if we did some of these things, if we started to sell treasuries, if we started to seize American companies, if we started to do these things to the Americans, then what people would say in Europe is, if we start doing this, we're going to destroy the relationship with the United States. Then we need this relationship with the United States to take on the Russians, to take on the Chinese, to do all of these things, and so that we can continue somehow to be part of the collective West. So we won't do it. What power we have, we will allow it, we will continue to allow it to drain away. I mean, the sense of demoralization in Europe, the sense of Europe being in a state of utter political degradation. It's difficult for people in China to understand. You have to go back to the collapse of China in, say, the 1920s, you know, with the period of the warlords, to get some of the sense of what the mood in Europe is like now.
You see, here's again very contradictory, because you just said that Europeans like to show power. Well, now is your time to show your power, okay? To protect Greenland, okay? Why don't you, then they're afraid to show their power. Remember, I think you told me that Bessent told Trump that China will never use the rare earth card. China will never dare to do that. Well, China did. What can the United States do? Nothing. Okay, they have to cave. They have to come to the rescue. All right, now, okay. So if Europe really played their cards right, I think Trump will cave. Trump will,
Well,
will
indeed. Well, indeed. Not just that. I mean, you might say to yourself, look, I'm going to cave now because I have no choice. I mean, I can't, I can't, I mean, the Americans could switch off cloud computing and we're in trouble. We need, therefore, to buy time in order to organize ourselves there. And because that's what China would do in the same position. That's what Russia would do in the same position. Say, we have a problem with cloud computing. Let's put together the engineers. Let's get the industries moving. Let's work it out. And in a year, in a 2 years' time, if we prioritize it, we will start to make progress, and our position relative to the Americans will get stronger. Nobody's talking in Europe in that way. I mean, you talked about how in China, they suddenly discovered that the chips they make are not that bad, and they're going to make even better ones. And we're building lithography machines and reproducing what ASML does, and they'll be there in a relatively short time. We could do this in Europe. ASML's lithography machines are made in Europe. As I made the point on another channel, I said, look, why are the chips being made in Taiwan using European lithography machines? Why are they not being made in Europe? Why didn't Netherlands decide, since the lithography machines are being made in the Netherlands, why didn't the Netherlands decide to focus on being the place where the high-end chips were built? Or if not the Netherlands, which has a history in precision manufacturing, why not Germany? Why not Sweden? Why not Switzerland? But no, we just, don't do anything. We wring our hands. We cry over it with each other. We say that the Americans are being horrible to us, but we just come back and we come back for more. As I said, in the 1920s in China, there was resistance. I mean, there was. If you go back, you read the history, there was resistance.
May 4th.
May 4th. I mean, this is when Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong and within the Kuomintang, they were organizing, they were looking for a way back. Sun Yat-sen, obviously. We've got nothing. We are worse in a sense, in a far worse position psychologically than China was in the 1920s.
It's such abusive relationship. Absolutely. It's very much like a relationship that, between the man and woman, it could be very abusive. The man is extremely abusive, but the woman stayed with the man, for whatever reason.
Exactly.
Trump's board of peace. Okay. What exactly? Now, he said at some point it can replace the United Nations. Does he really believe that it can replace the United Nations? Is that the purpose?
That's probably. It's also to give him a lifetime job, because he's going to appoint himself lifetime chairman. So when he ceases to become president of the United States because he has to retire, then he will continue to be president of the Board of Peace. And the entry fee is $1 billion per country, just to remember. So that puts him in an even, he's got all that money to play with as well. So, I mean, it's partly, as I said, a retirement fund for Donald Trump. And it also feeds his vanity and his megalomania, which, I mean, let's face it, I mean, there's a huge amount of that. And, he thinks that, this is going to be the way in which he's going to replace the United Nations. The Americans have always been busy trying to find ways ever since the 1990s to, if not replace the United Nations, either to weaken it. But I mean, they do set up things in rivalry to it. You remember Joe Biden's League of Democracies? Okay. I mean, this is just the next version of that.
Which actually tells me that United Nations, for always flaws, maybe relatively speaking, is still a good organization to have. I still think it's important to have United Nations, a functioning one.
No question at all. But the problem with the United Nations from an American point of view, is that China and Russia has vetoes
Yeah.
in the Security Council. That's really why they don't like the United Nations. John Bolton, who used to be George W. Bush's ambassador, he said that the Security Council, in his opinion, should have a membership of one, the United States.
But they don't understand, because China and Russia, these are extremely powerful countries. If you don't have them, first of all, they would not join if they don't have veto power, right? So veto power, actually, for the longest time, I thought it's bad for, it's not the best, it's not democratic because it's giving only 5 countries the veto power. On the other hand, again, lots of people in China discuss this. On the other hand, if you don't give these great power, the veto power, they will probably not go into the United Nations sincerely. Okay, which means they would do things, whatever they want. Right now, because they have veto power, they're still part of this organization. And this organization, United Nations, is still somewhat serve their purpose. Thereby, they have a stake in this organization, which eventually actually helps the middle and the small countries. Because if you don't have this at all, well, they don't have the veto power. They just do things however they want it. There's nothing there to control them.
That is absolutely correct. I mean, given if there was no veto power, especially given that the United Nations is based in New York, the Americans would very quickly gain complete control. Yeah. And it would just become another instrument of US foreign policy, and it would lose all international. I mean, it would fall apart very quickly. Yeah. By the way, the arguments you have just made were the arguments that were made at the time when the United Nations was created. And the person who insisted that there must be a power of veto was Joseph Stalin. Okay. That became. And the point was that the Americans acknowledged the force of his points and agreed. I mean, they said, if we don't have veto power, this thing isn't going to work.
No. No. Yeah. They're just not going to work in this, No, they would just do whatever they want. They can't. Exactly. Carney just said they can't, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So just to read to you the Chinese foreign minister spokesperson has been asked twice now. Every day they've been asked about, we're trying to join this board of peace. And so this is what he said. He said, China received a U.S. invitation to join the peace committee. And then he said a whole bunch of things. And then he said, regardless of how the international situation changes, China remains firmly committed to safeguarding the international system with the United Nations at its core, the international order based on international law, and the basic norms of international relations based on the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter. Sounds to me is a no. China will not join this board of peace.
I rather agree with that, actually. And I think China now is the great defender of the United Nations system and of international law. So I think that is the line that the Chinese are going to take.
Okay. Today is supposed to be the day, Trump's supposed to ban TikTok. So yesterday they finalized the TikTok deal, which is pretty much, we talked about this before, and it's pretty much what the Chinese media reported. It seems to me like everything is as it is, except that there were a few more investors. They are all Trump friends. That they'll get the chance to probably bring this to the public in a year or two period, so they get a chance to make huge piles of money. So that's basically what happened, right?
Another shakedown, in other words. I mean, it's seriously. I actually coined the expression. I said that under Trump, the United States operates the Corleone school of diplomacy. I mean, it's straight out of The Godfather now. It's a shakedown.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps that's not how it started, but that's what it's devolved into.
I have a question. So when I look at the board members, right, the board members consist of 7 people. So they are representative from the investors. So look at the investor, TPG Global, Susquehanna International Group, Silver Lake, and this DXC Technology, Oracle, and MGX. And then, of course, CEO Chow. Okay. First of all, MGX is not even a US-based company. This is a UAE-based investment fund. All right. And Oracle, for example, any of these companies, Silver Lake or Oracle, any of one of them, they could at any point be sold to a Chinese investor.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't guarantee anything.
No.
Isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's stupid.
It's stupid. Well, as I said, if you're looking at things strategically, you're quite right. I mean, if you're looking at things strategically, you wouldn't be closing down or trying to do this with TikTok.
Yeah.
But as I said, if it's a shakedown,
Yeah.
if it's just a way of making a lot of people who are friends of the president a lot of money, well, then it makes a kind of sense, I suppose. If you have the Al Capone philosophy of government, then, as I said, it makes a great deal of sense.
Yeah, it's lots of things now. It's for show, I think, and behind the show is people making money. It's just the
Exactly. I'm going to say this: to what extent Trump himself sits down and thinks this through in that way, or whether he's manipulated by people around him. That's the one thing. That's the one on the question I cannot answer. But as I always say, does it ultimately make any difference? I mean,
it has nothing to do with national security for sure.
No.
The Epstein files. So it is remarkable, right? The Justice Department could just defy the law, which Trump signed. Yes. But I did see Thomas Massie had an interview, and he's saying they still have plenty of tools. They are not giving up. So he believes eventually everything will be available, will become public, even though right now only 1%. But in the meantime, there's still drama going on. People probably don't pay attention. The Clintons, for example, are being subpoenaed to give testimony, and they so far hasn't showed up. So they're above the law.
No, well, it seems that there are now moves in Congress finally to put them in contempt. Okay. We'll see what that comes to. I mean, in theory, that could come with a prison sentence.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Okay.
But we'll see whether they actually do that. To my mind, I mean, the Clintons have behaved with such open brazenness here. I mean, the Clintons have never shown a huge respect for the law at all. No. It must be said. But this takes it to a completely new level.
And then also they send a request to a judge. They want the judge to appoint a master to oversee the release of the documents. But then the court judge basically rejected that, but not fully. Kind of like the judge is saying, I'm not I don't have the authority to do that. Now, according to Massie, he said, we don't say you have, we have the authority. What the judge said, you don't have that authority. And the Massie said, we don't say we have the authority. We ask you to do that. So as a lawyer, how do you see that play out?
Well, the use of a master in all of this is something that is not unknown by any means in cases of this kind. But law should, there is this expression that that justice should not only be done, but should be seen to be done.
Okay.
I think we've now reached this point in this whole process where so much damage has been done to public trust by efforts at concealment, that the better thing to do is to simply make everything public. Whatever horrors there are there, I mean, let's face it, they're no worse than the horrors we see every day in all kinds of things, in which children also see. So, I mean, just put it all out there. There'll be some people who are very embarrassed. They can come up with their own explanations, which would be interesting to know what they are, by the way. But I mean, I think that if this is going to be, if this is going to be done properly, and the point I would, by the way, the issue of trust and the public interest is a legally understood point. I mean, I'm actually making a legal point as well as a political one. I think that the point has now been reached that it's better to put it all out there, have it all out there in the open, as was originally promised, and let people make up their minds.
O'Connor and both Thomas Massey and O'Connor, they both said something like that. Well, it's not even clear to me that even everything is out, those people will be held criminally accountable. It's not even clear of.
Yes.
Well, what they both pointed out is that some of those people, apparently quite a few bankers, some of their name on scholarships, their names on buildings. Yeah. Okay, so at least once those names are out, at least take down those names. I actually think that's the minimum we should do as a society.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is incredibly, even if no actual crime was committed by some of these people, the behavior altogether remains profoundly corrupt.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, corruption isn't just a legal concept, it's a moral concept as well. If you are going to befriend Epstein and attend these parties and be there and go to his house and see all these awful pictures and go there again and again and again and be photographed by him in that kind of way, then you are a corrupt person, morally.
Yeah. This is what O'Connor said. I think he summarized it very well. He said the important thing, why he's pushing so hard to release the file, he said is the purpose of that is to force a reckoning in this country. Biggest scandal in his view, 100 years, expose how sick our elite culture is. For their own gratification, they think they can just abuse these girls and nothing will happen. That kind of culture has permeated across the nation. They need to be shamed. I really think that's...
I could not agree more strongly. Yeah. I think that is exactly correct.
Yeah.
And unless that is done, this thing will fester.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the perpetrators will say, well, Epstein, they did all of this with Epstein. We can still go on doing this because as we saw with Epstein, in the end, the authorities will cover it all up.
Yeah. Yeah. They get away with it. Things that normal people don't get away with. Right. And they're above the law.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
There's another thing got lots of attention in China. There's a university ranking, Leiden University ranking. It's among, I don't put too much on all these rankings because in the past, all the rankings in the West, I think all the US universities are overrated. But anyway, this one surprised anybody. It's based on publishing, the amount of the published paper and also the citation of the published paper. So based on those two criteria, the top 25, only 6 of them are non-Chinese universities. Wow. Harvard University ranked number 3, which I think shocked even China. There's lots of discussion of that.
It doesn't surprise me. And I'm going to say something else as well. I mean, this is just published material because I'm very, very, very sure, given, the way the world works, that there's a huge amount of unpublished research going on around. And if we had all of that out there as well, I suspect that, it would be the Chinese dominance would be even greater.
Yeah. But in general, I do think U.S. universities are overrated. I read,
absolutely.
For example, I was shocked to read that 38% of the Stanford University is undergraduates. They claim some kind of a disability and request extra exam time. I'm surprised. 38%. I would think people in Stanford. You see, in China, if this is Tsinghua University, I think the opposite. If you give those students, I can give you extra time, the student would say no. I can manage. I can use half the time and still get it correct.
Well, so, you are completely correct. Can I just say? I mean, it's not just American universities that are overrated. British universities also are. I mean, again, I speak as the husband of a wife who is an academic and who has taught in Cambridge and Oxford. I mean, they are not. I mean, they're very good, but they're not as good as I think many people think, just to say. So, and, if we're talking about international rankings, Moscow State University ranked below the University of Reading.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Reading in Britain is a good university, but it is not comparable to the University of Moscow. I mean, it's just absurd to think that it is. So these things have always been distorted, and they've been distorted for all the usual reasons that we all know. But at this precise period of time, there's no doubt at all that Chinese universities are becoming increasingly dominant. And it's exactly as you said. I mean, China, first of all, is a culture which prizes learning and scholarship more than any other. There is a history of scholarship going back millennia to an extent that no one in the West can match. And of course, as you rightly say, Chinese students are very, very motivated to work hard. By the way, Western students used to be. I have a disability. I have very bad issues with my eyes. I had them when I was a 18 to 21 year old. I mean, I have a squint. I see double of everything. Which affects my reading. It means I get, migraines very, very easily. But I never thought when I was at university to make that an issue. I worked alongside everybody else. I put up with the migraines, and I still did well in my university. And I'm sure that is very much the attitude in China.
That's what I thought. Certainly at university like Stanford, that would be the attitude of the, overcome your difficulties, right? That's part of the learning and growing up. Okay. But
when I was at university, I don't remember anybody bringing up the issue of disabilities at all. I mean, I just don't. I mean, maybe there were some people, but I just don't remember it ever happening. Now you're absolutely right. I mean, most of them claim, but I can tell you, because my wife, as I said, works there. At any one time, at least half the student body are claiming disabilities of some kind.
I encountered them. I used to teach also in the university, and there were one time was particularly bad. It's 75 minutes class, and then after I started, there were people coming in, bringing coffee and bagel and in and out, and then so finally after like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's still in and out. I can't teach like that. So finally I have to say something. I said, well, there's only 75 minutes. If I can come here on time, I don't need to go out to the restroom during this time. I'm way older than you are. You can do it. You're younger than me, right?
Absolutely.
So this is not an airport. But guess what? They reported it to my department head.
Well, there you go. No, I think they would do that here too. They would do. They would do that too. Absolutely.
They demanded I apologize. I didn't name names. I didn't want to embarrass any particular student. I'm just saying this is, generally speaking, we need to respect everybody's time. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, anyway. The last thing is just typical thing. The Spanish high-speed train crash was very interesting, because when I first heard the high-speed train crash, I thought, well, if there's anything to do remotely close to China, they would have named names. But no, they were very quiet. Who's the one who made the train or the track or anything? Turns out it's a Japanese, Hitachi. It's very typical, isn't it? If they were anything related to China, they would have told everybody that's China. It's China's fault, right?
Absolutely. I remember this is about 15 years ago, fairly early on. There was a train accident in China with high-speed trains. It was all over the media. I remember it. Proof that the Chinese high-speed train system, the China is developing, is inefficient, dangerous. Nobody, of course, says that today. But you're absolutely right. If they could find a way to pin it on China, of course they would. Of course they would.
Yeah.
High-speed trains, as Chinese people understand them, do not exist in Europe. We have trains that are faster than other trains. And some of them are very fast, but they're not up to the sort of speeds that you would find on the Chinese network, just to say.
Not here in the United States either.
No.
Which is why Trump should forget about Greenland, forget about Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Do something here in the United States.
Yes. or $1.5 trillion defense budgets.
Yeah.
No.
Do you think he does seems like mentioning Canada also? So do you think he's not giving up on Canada either? Do you think so?
Oh, I think not. I'm sure he'll come back. I don't think the Greenland business is sorted, by the way. I think the Europeans gave him quite a lot because with sovereign bases and all of that. But knowing Trump, in a few weeks' time, he'll come back and demand more. I mean, that's always how he works.
Yeah. So we still have a lot to wait and see, right? So
absolutely.
He used to, I think, change his mind every few days and then become like every day. And now it's almost like every hour he would change his mind.
That's right. Absolutely.
Keep us busy.
He keeps us very busy. But it's exciting. If it's nothing else.
It is. It's first on the 20th, January 20th was 1 year anniversary. He became the president, right? So he had a lengthy press conference and showing all kinds of papers. I thought that was bad enough, but then he continued in Davos. It seems like he's not done. It's all about how great he is, how much he achieved, and then blame everything on everybody else, right? So it's very interesting. Okay.
He's very, beneath it all, he's very insecure.
That's true.
I mean, a person who behaves like that doesn't believe in himself.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping doesn't need to go around waving
the paper.
That's inconceivable that could happen.
So let's see what he come up with next week.
Oh, indeed.
All right.
Indeed.
Let's talk.
Let's talk next week. Have a great week. Until then.
Bye.
Bye, Sophia. Bye.